Hello everyone. So I just wanted to read through this list of important points that I really want you to take on board for your home learning, okay? So firstly, this slide is going to be at the start of every single video. You don't need to listen to it every time. It will be the same information, but it's there if you need to go back and check anything, okay? So just listen to it this first time and then you can skip through it. So you need to send me a picture of your work on Show My Homework or via my email address, which is there. All right, that's how you're going to show me that you have completed the lesson. If the slide says optional, which will normally just be at the end, okay, for maybe the plenary or something, this means that you only complete it if you would like to, but just that one slide, all right? I will chase work from after 9 a.m. on the following day. Okay, so if you have not submitted it to me, I will be messaging you on Show My Homework asking for it. If you don't come back to me, that gets passed on to your house managers who will make a call home, okay? So where I've put a picture of a phone camera on a slide or video, all right, this means I probably think that's a good task for you to photograph and send to me as proof, excuse me, that you have completed the lesson, all right? You must treat this like a normal lesson, guys. You need to listen to my narration, pause the video to work on tasks when you need to, and you can go back to revisit different bits as well. Where there's a green box and an arrow somewhere in the video, that means I'm pointing to something that you won't be able to access on the video. So a clip from YouTube or a worksheet. That's when you need to pause the video, go back to Show My Homework, find the link, it will be there where this piece of work is, all right, or find the document for the worksheet. If you can't open the video, then there is a PDF and you can work through the tasks as best as you can. They're exactly the same thing though. We've also created a history team YouTube channel called History Scholar. All of the videos, all of these narration videos will all be on there, okay? So there's be a playlist for your year group. Go into your year group and you, as me as your teacher, need to be looking for the one that says Miss West and then the lesson that you're after, all right? I would advise you copy out tasks onto paper. You won't need to print anything, okay? But if you are completing work on a computer, then I would really advise that you only do that if you're able to print it. Because you need to bring, which brings me on to my next point, which is super important, you need to keep all of your completed history lesson work safe. All right, you need to bring it in with you when we're back in school, and we will spend our first lesson gluing it into your books. I will then collect your books and mark the work that you have done, all right? So if you've completed your work on a computer, you must print it or start completing it on paper. Everybody is off, guys. So if everyone sent me their work to print, I'm at home too, okay? So I'm not in school because I'm isolating as well. But I expect to see that work when we return to school. All of the work, the whole lesson for all of the lessons that you've been set. If you've got any questions or there's anything that you're unsure about, then just send me a message on Show My Homework or email me and I will do my best to answer you, okay? Enjoy the lessons. Please work hard. We have to remember that we have to treat this like we were still in school. So there's no excuse. You wouldn't not do your history work in my lesson, so there's no excuse to not do it now, okay? So good luck. Message me if you've got any questions. Okay, so as I said, guys, we just need to be treating this as a normal lesson. So you've got your title there, you've got your lesson objectives, and you've got your keywords. So you need to write all of those things down for me, please. One of the things that I just wanted to point out was that if when you go through this, some of the narration is talking about the cover teacher, that is because when I created the narration for this, it was because I thought you were going to be doing it in class. Then obviously things change, okay? So just ignore any of the parts about the cover teacher. You are working through this. You are pausing this video where you need to so that you can work on the tasks as you need to. I also want to point out, guys, this is 2 lessons worth of work. Okay, 2 lessons worth of work. This is a long lesson, so I'm not expecting you to get it all done in one hit. All right, it is 2 lessons. So this is for this lesson and your next lesson. So I will reset this exact same thing again, and you just need to pick up on where you left off last time, okay? So we just want to do a quick recap on our previous lesson that you should have done last week, and that was on the slave trade. So if the cover teacher can just press the space bar once to display the question and then press it again and the answer will come up, There are only 2 recap questions to get the students thinking about what they did last time. That's fairly straightforward. And once they've done that, you can move on to the next slide. So for this slide, guys, we're going to be doing one of our source questions that we always do, and we do that for practice. So you guys get used to answering source questions, as you know that for some of you, you really find that difficult. So you know by now that the most important part for this task is to write in full sentences. I'm not so concerned about the answer. This is about getting you to write in full sentences about the source that you can see on the right there. Okay, so it was written by Harriet Ann Jacobs in an autobiography, which means where someone writes about their life, called Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl, and it's from 1861. Jacobs was an African-American writer who escaped from slavery and she was later freed. Okay, so the questions in yellow need to be answered and you should take no more than about 7 or 8 minutes to do this. Again, please make sure you are answering in full sentences. So you had a little look at the source there, and that gives you a bit of an idea of what a slave auction might have been like. Okay, so when the slaves step off the boat, this is normally one of these 2 things would happen. Okay, neither of them are particularly pleasant. So we have got the first one. We've got the scramble. So buyers would be given a ticket for each slave that they've decided to buy. A bell sounds and the door to the slave cage opens. The buyers rush in and they grab the slaves or slave that they wanted. So if they bought 10 tickets, they go out with 10 slaves. And they would still examine the slaves first because they don't want to buy an unhealthy slave. Okay, but the point is, this doesn't put slave owners against each other bidding. This allows it to be first come, first serve. So if you're quickest and you can spot the healthy slaves quickly, then you can get the better slaves. Okay, so that's the scramble. And then we've got the auction. So slaves are paraded in front of buyers on a raised platform or a box. Okay, buyers would then, sorry for the spelling mistake there, guys, bid against each other, with the slave being sold to the highest bidder. Unhealthy slaves often weren't sold, and this is where you get also situations where families are often separated. So on the next slide are going to be some questions for you to answer. So you need to be really thinking about this information because I'm going to ask you about it on the next slide. So you've got 2 questions to answer there, guys. The first question is to describe the 2 different ways in which the slaves were sold. So you need to tell me about the scramble and the auction separately. They're 2 separate questions there. And then you've got question 2 where it says, why do you think the slaves were examined? What might the buyers have been looking for? You've got a couple of sentence starters below. So if the cover teacher could give about 8 minutes or so for this, and on the next slide, there is no narration from me because it is a clip, which hopefully will work. So watch the clip and then I will speak to you guys on the slide that follows. So this is what I mentioned to you at the start, guys. This clip will not work because you're watching this on a video. So what you need to do is go back to where you found this homework on Show My Homework. You need to find the YouTube clip, and there are 2 there. So you need to be watching the one that is about auctions. So pause this video, go back and find it, watch that clip, then come back. Okay, so I hope you found that clip interesting. It's pretty hard hitting, but you know, it was the reality of what it was like at the time, and those slave auctions happened on a daily basis. So for this task that's on the board now, it's just a simple matching task. So you just need to write out the sentences on the left and you need to match them with the sentences on the right. So if the cover teacher could just do that when the students have done it, if you then press the space bar, it should be that the animation comes up and connects them by a line, so you can go through the answers with them when they've completed it. So you just press the space bar each time and one will come up. For those of you that are watching from home on Show My Homework, you might find that it's already there, the black lines, in which case I'm sorry, but you need to copy them out anyway in the correct order into your books. So first of 2 main mind map tasks that you're going to do today, guys. So the first one is on slave auctions. So everything that we've looked at, the clips, the information I gave you, and anything else that you've seen, the source at the start as well, you need to create a mind map on slave auctions. So you need to have quite a lot of space for this in your book. and I want you to take your time. I've put some buzzwords in the boxes below there to help you, okay, to think of things to write about, to give you some reminders, just to help your memory. So try and get as much information as possible into this. So we're going to move on to the second part of the lesson now, which is really concerned with plantation life. So we're following the journey that the slaves took. So they've gone from Africa, they've had this awful journey on the boat, the Middle Passage. They've then arrived in America or wherever it is they're arriving. They've been sold at auction and they are then taken by wagon to a plantation more often than not. Okay, and they would live and they'd work here until they died, or they were sold to another plantation unless they managed to escape. And that really is what we look at next lesson. So we do look at how they managed to do that. But basically, for anyone that isn't aware of what a plantation is, it is one of your keywords, but it's a farm that grows things such as cotton, sugar, or tobacco. These sorts of things were grown mainly in the south of America, which is how the South made so much money by having free labour from the slaves to do all their picking of cotton, sugar, and tobacco. So I wanted us to focus on a plantation. This actually, you can see the picture on the right of the screen there. This is the Oak Alley plantation. I actually visited here. So these are my photos that you're now going to see. So I visited here when I was on holiday in America. Oak Alley plantation is located just outside of New Orleans in Louisiana. Loads of TV shows and films about slavery have been filmed there. It had a big list of things that have been filmed there. You can see that from the outside, it is beautiful with those beautiful oak trees, which is how it gets its name. Okay, but what I really found most interesting was the difference between the plantation owners, the house that they lived in, and the living quarters that the slaves would live in. So before we go on to the next slide and you can see some photos and you can have a bit of discussion, I want you to now have a chat with the person next to you. How do you think the two might have been different? So concentrate on what you think was in the bedroom and dining room of the Oak Alley plantation house, so where the plantation owner lived, and how that might have compared to the slave bedroom and dining room for where the slaves lived. Okay, so if you do about 3 or 4 minutes just to discuss this, okay, and just at the bottom right there, you can see the proof. That is me standing on that balcony in the middle at the top with the Oak Alley behind me, just to prove that I did actually go there. So you can see here, guys, which side, so would this be the plantation owner's house or the slaves' quarters house? It's fairly obvious. You can see the sorts of things that are in the house, particularly the dining room and the bedroom. This is a children's bedroom that the photograph is of. The pink chair would often have been used by the nanny, who would have been a slave, who was pretty much responsible for taking care of the children. But you can see it's a beautiful wooden bed frame with beautiful bed sheets. Beautiful wooden floors, flowers in the room. It's a nice airy light room with big windows. And then you've got the dining room. Obviously it's a large dining table because they would regularly entertain other guests. And all of the food and the place settings and all of that sort of thing would have been done by black slaves, the house slaves, whose job it was would be do those sorts of things. So you can see it's quite opulent, and you've got the candlesticks on the tables, the fresh flowers. There's lots of antique things around the room. Okay, very, very different to what we're about to see for the other type of people. So the complete flip side here, so you can see on the right hand side is the slave quarters. So there were quite a few of these sort of cabins, and they would house a few slaves in each one on the Oak Alley plantation. Dining room didn't really exist. They were just living in one very basic square sort of room. So you can see they've got what looks like it resembles a mattress in the corner there. They're hanging their clothes on the wooden beams of the cabin. There's a singular chair there, and then above you've got what would be their cooking facilities, so their kitchen dining area. So they're just cooking outside on pots under fire. So it's very old-fashioned for the time, and very, very different to what the plantation owners would have been used to. So this was just a question I wanted you guys to think about. So again, this is another one of the photos that I took. So I want you to talk to the person next to you, and then maybe your cover teacher will form a bit of a discussion with you. Where do you think these names are located in the plantation, and what could they mean? All right, what are these names? So life on a plantation, guys, was hard, okay? But there was, I don't think any of you sitting there were thinking that it was going to be a picnic. And once they'd had this awful trip and they'd been torn away from their families at auction, that they were going to rock up to a plantation and have a lovely life, okay? It was not a great life. So just starting from the top there, you've got white masters had complete control over the lives of their slaves, and they treated them like property. They had purchased them, okay? They were a piece of property to them to do with as they wished. They worked for most of their lives. Women mostly worked in the big house. They were cooks, cleaners, and nannies. Most of the men and some of the other women worked out in the fields, okay? And that was really hard, backbreaking work. You're picking cotton all day, and you are being watched all day as well by overseers to make sure that you are doing the maximum amount of work, that you're not, you know, taking your time. You're expected to pick a lot of cotton in a day, for example. So even the toddlers, and you can see them in the picture there on the bottom right, so toddlers aged 3 to 4, they pick weeds or they'd carry water, and as they got older, their hours would increase. So this is why when at auctions, if a woman was there with a baby, the slave owners didn't want to buy a baby because all that would do is stop the woman working. But anywhere from a toddler age up, they would take them because they could put them to work, basically. As soon as they could walk, they were useful to them. As the slaves got older, they did a lot less physical work, purely because they couldn't do it quickly enough. So they were often then just replaced with another slave that could work quickly. It wasn't because, oh, it must be really hard for them because they're old. That wasn't the case. It was purely, well, they can't produce as much work, therefore we'll replace them. Slaves often had their names changed, okay, to something simple such as John Brown. Okay, as the slave owners couldn't and didn't want to try and pronounce any of the beautiful African names that they came with. And the previous slide there, I should probably just go back to that. That list there, that is on the wall in one of the cabins, and it is a list of all of the slaves that lived on that plantation. And if you go back to it, if you get a chance, you'll see some of the names, the majority of the names are just very plain sounding names. There are not that many African names. The life expectancy of a slave, and this is shocking, was 26. And that was due to the poor diets that they were given, the incredibly harsh punishments, which we're going to look at in a moment, and the complete lack of medical attention. So if they became unwell, that they weren't taken to a doctor, that just didn't happen. They had no rights. They were not allowed to learn to read or write. Fairly often, that was the case. They weren't allowed to marry, and they certainly weren't allowed to own property. Okay, they were the property. So another clip here, guys, that you will need to watch. Same thing as before. Pause this video, go back to your show my homework, watch the clip, and then come back and press play. So it's another really interesting clip there, guys, okay? Giving you lots of information about life on the plantation. As I said from the start, it was hard. It wasn't an easy life. However, I do want you to kind of bear in mind that not all plantation owners were monsters, that, you know, the slaves were expected to do work. They were not paid. They were property. However, some slaves were taught to read and write by their owners. There certainly were some good ones out there, but they were very, very few and far between. So I just want to take a bit of time to chat about the different punishments that the slaves have, and then on the next slide, I think going to be your second mind map that you're going to do. So the overseers were basically people, guys, normally men, quite big men, and they were hired to keep an eye on the slaves in the fields. They'd often have a whip with them, for example, and if a slave was working too slowly, they would punish them. So whipping with a leather strap was a really popular punishment for the smallest of things. You're not working quick enough, they would whip them. You've stolen an egg or something, they would be whipped, and the number of whips that they would get depended on what they had done. All right. There were regular beatings, so they would be beaten all the time, again for the smallest of things: slap, kick, punch. There was a thing that was done called hotboxing, which was really, really very unpleasant. It was a metal box. It was built in the ground. A slave would be placed in there for a period of time without water. So it's a completely dark, hot hole in the ground. Bearing in mind this is the South and it is very, very hot there. And they were sometimes left in there for the whole day. It's not pleasant at all. They'd often have heavy iron chains hung around their necks with extra weights added if they'd done something wrong. Slaves who were constantly a problem, so ones that kept breaking the rules, they would just be sold at auction and separated from their families if they'd managed to stay with them in the first place. And any slave that ran away, they would be chased down. They would have dogs that would go out after them and actual slave finders that would go out to try and locate them. And when they were found, they'd just be brought back to the plantation and they'd often be branded with a hot iron in the shape of an R to show that they were a runaway, which would not be very pleasant. And you can see there the source on the right hand side. So it says, I've seen a Negro beat until some of his bones were broken, but even letting a pot boil over, which means just the water boiling too much on a pot that's on the stove. So that was by Alauda Equiano, and he was a former slave who we look at in the next couple of lessons. He was actually really, really important to the abolishing of the slave trade further down the time. And hopefully you can just see the picture in the background there. Now, I haven't got it up as a full picture because it really is quite a disturbing picture, but you can see that slave's back. And this is a really famous picture. His back is just completely scarred from the number of whippings that he's had. So that just shows, you know, that the punishments really were very, very harsh. So just very briefly, if the cover teacher could let the students just work on their mind map, give them about 15 minutes to do this. I really want it full of lots of information. So this is a completely new mind map. So you've done the auction one, and this is now your one on plantation life. So you do not add to your first one, you need to create a new one. Okay, and again, it should include everything you've learned about what I've said, what was in the clip. And I've put some more buzzwords there to help you remember things that you need to make sure that you're trying to talk about. Okay.